Hey everybody, thank you so much for your patience. This SCP is the biggest one I've done, and as a result, I'm going to be splitting it into 4 parts. I've done 80 plus drawings for this SCP, and they take a very long time to do, but I don't want to keep you all waiting for weeks and weeks for another upload, because I want to upload regularly and I want to keep you all entertained. If you want to keep updated on when the new parts are going to be released, just follow any of the social media platforms, because that's where I regularly upload updates. Without any further ado, let's get straight into this. Item SCP-610. Object Class Keter. Description: initial reports of SCP-610 came direct from the Russian government through undisclosable channels. These reports consisted primarily of disappearances of farmers in the region, and were not considered until the local police, followed by the regional police, and finally a government-dispatched agent, all failed to report in within a 72-hour period. A small military contingent was dispatched to the area and quickly withdrew, at which point the Foundation was contacted to investigate. The area of SCP-610 effects is close to Lake Baikal in the southern Siberia. Areas of known infection are marked on the map provided to us here. Containment perimeters are marked in blue surrounding those infected areas, and as of present, no further locations have been identified. Incursions into the perimeter must be reported prior to conducting, confirmed during exploration, and debriefed on immediately following return. SCP-610 appears to be a contagious skin disease, at first with symptoms including rash, itching, and increased skin sensitivity. Within 3 hours, the disease will cause blemishes resembling heavy scar tissue to form in the chest and arm areas, spreading to the legs and back within an additional hour, consuming the victim completely within 5 hours. Exposure to higher temperatures vastly decreases the time for contagion to spread, and complete infections have been recorded occurring as little as 5 minutes. After the completion of the infection occurs, the victim's life functions will cease for approximately 3 minutes, after which time they will restart at 2 to 3 times the activity rate of a normal human. Following this, the scar tissue on the victims will start to move of its own accord and grow at a rapid rate. Normal human features begin to disappear at this point under the infection, and the path of mutation appears to be largely random. Subjects observed in this stage of infection have been recorded as growing 3 or more limbs of a type, such as arms or legs. The head may become misshapen and elongate or widen out, and parts of the subject may split open from which additional branches of flesh will grow. The duration of this stage of infection is unknown, and not all subjects appear to progress to the later stages. Under unknown conditions, an infected individual will cease moving and place itself in a location it deems suitable where it roots itself. The fleshy growth on the victim will then begin to spread itself all across the surrounding objects and consume them. Such objects do not spread the infection as living creatures do, however, and the effect of prolonged contact with these objects is recorded later in this document. It is assumed that this behaviour is to create an area hospitable to continued growth of the other infected. Observation of life infected by SCP-610 by staff is impossible. Those infected with the disease immediately seek out aid as natural human impulse, resulting in unintended infections. Those infected past the scar tissue phase actively and aggressively attempt to infect anyone approaching them within an undefined area. It has been established that should an infected be capable of sight and observe an uninfected, it will proceed towards them. If the infected has lost the ability of sight, a range of approximately 30 meters is considered safe. Observation of SCP-610 infected settlements has been established using artificial methods such as remote robots. The data returned from these observations, coupled with the openly aggressive nature of the infected to attempt to spread SCP-610, has resulted in the Keter classification. However, so long as nothing is allowed to enter or leave the infected area, it is considered a neutralized threat. Of concern are the cavernous areas beneath the infected settlements that were discovered during the exploration, and attempts to get research personnel into these areas are underway. Special containment procedures. Due to the vast area of infection, SCP-610 covers containment is impossible. Isolation of the area has proved far more effective, and permission has been granted by the Russian government to establish a perimeter to keep people out of these areas under the guise of military operations. Should any organism displaying traits consistent with SCP-610 be sighted near this perimeter, then the established protocol requires it to be engaged at range with small arms until immobile, then dispatched using incendiary weapons and munitions from as great a distance as possible. Any living thing coming in physical contact with an organism infected with SCP-610 is considered expendable. and is to be immediately terminated and incinerated. Any persons coming within 3 meters of SCP-610 infected life are to immediately withdraw from the area, be isolated from the rest of their team, and subjected to medical examination using only remote techniques to determine if infection has occurred, and appropriate steps taken based on that determination. At present, the known infection vectors for SCP-610's spread seem to be focused on physical contact. Drone movements within heavily infected areas have returned air samples containing minute particulate, which when exposed to organic compounds will result in the spread of SCP-610. The result of these particular tests have revealed that the most require several days to manifest, if at all, with the exception of direct contact with exposed lung and liver tissue. These particular tests show a rapid rate of growth which requires incineration of the testing environment no more than 24 hours after initial exposure, with even a 2-hour mishap risking a compromised facility event. Given that this kind of rapid growth only occurs in organic material existing outside the human body, this form of infection is currently considered a minor concern. These peculiarities have given rise to a series of questions regarding the possible origin of the infection in conjunction with the failed containment protocol remains a scorched earth policy at this time, and no concern for transmission via water or air at infection parameters exists, barring situational changes in the field. SCP-610-L1. After establishing the containment perimeter for SCP-610, the Russian government approved our request to research and investigate the area. For the first such exploration, a small camera-mounted unit known as Herbie was dispatched at a safe distance and directed towards Site A. Herbie has a battery life of 12 hours and a control range far wider than that required for this dispatch. Herbie is able to enter Site A without incident. The landscape around Site A shows early stages of assimilation by singular SCP-610 infected, who have fallen at largely random intervals around what remains of the village. Many of the homes appear to have suffered fire damage long since put out, however a fair amount still remain intact. Aerial reconnaissance of Site A combined with thermal imaging has put it in an estimated population of 79 infected. Immobile infected are included in this number, however it is difficult to ascertain an exact percentage of mobile versus immobile. Varying degrees of physical mutation due to SCP-610 are present in Site A, and it is assumed that all inhabitants are in advanced stages of infection. Herbie observed the exterior of the village for 2 hours, during which time all infected behaved with what appeared to be a loose sense of social structure. Because Herbie remained stationary during this observation period, it is unknown precisely what each individual infected person was doing. However, the central plaza experienced occasional bursts of activity and downtime. Requiring more information, Herbie was directed to follow an infected and had entered the home. There is a bumpy camera feed as Herbie scoots over the gravel behind the quickly shambling infected person. After entering the home, Herbie's camera was raised slowly as to not draw attention. This action was either unnoticed or ignored. The infected person is watched from the doorway as it hobbles around the home and stops at each of the other visible infected organisms. However, it appears to ignore the one under the table, which, while not immobile, does not leave that area. What this creature was before infection is unclear. After lapping the table and repeating this procedure 3 times, the primary infected, known as Alpha henceforward, stops at the bedridden infected known as Beta, and proceeds to assault it with furious punches. Beta is unable to leave the bed for unknown reasons, but is not completely immobile as it flails its arms in response to the beatings delivered by Alpha. After several sustained minutes of this beating, a piercing sound explodes from the area around Beta, who then proceeds to project a cloud of unknown matter into the air from its chest cavity. Alpha lingers in the cloud as it floats in the air around them, slowly descending to the ground. The unknown life form on the table aside Beta begins to twitch in an apparent seizure, and Alpha then laps the room twice more, stopping again at each infected organism, but still ignoring the one under the table, as well as Beta now. After these 2 laps, Alpha sits itself at the table and reaches out to position the 3 plates atop it, as if setting our dinner set. After the plates are positioned, the facial tendrils extending from Alpha wiggle up and start to coil on one of the plates before tearing apart and separating. This is repeated at each plate. After each plate is filled with Alpha's flesh, it leaves the table and approaches Herbie, which is moved from Alpha's path. Alpha leaves the home, but Herbie's camera remains focused on the table. After several minutes, a group comprised of 6 to 7 infected enter the room from outside, still ignoring Herbie. Each infected shambles as if movement is difficult, jerking in large steps or squirming in the small ones. These infected all surround the table and each take turns grabbing handfuls of the flesh substance left behind by Alpha, pressing it into whatever orifice on themselves that they can, some into mouth, some into the chest, some behind their backs, some under their arms. When all the plates are empty, this group leaves. Herbie remains here for several more minutes before retracting its camera and leaving. Immediately after leaving the home, Herbie collides with an object. Panning the camera around, the obstruction appears to be Alpha, whose facial tendrils are intermingling with another infected having similar mutations. The impact is ignored, and the two infected part ways after several minutes. Herbie is then directed to explore more areas of the village. The remains of what appear to have been a store show signs of severe fire damage as well as activity inside the building, which Herbie moves to investigate. The door is slightly ajar, and with firm movements of Herbie it is pushed open. No notice is taken of this action, or if so, it is ignored. Inside the store are several infected persons, most of whom are standing around. However, one is on the ground rolling back and forth over the space of approximately 0.3 meters and is ignored by the others. Herbie rolls under the divider separating the cashier area from the customer area and pans around behind the counter. The upper half of a person is protruding from a cellar door behind the counter. This person does not appear to be suffering from advanced infection and wears the garb of a Russian soldier. Herbie zooms the camera in to confirm identification, and it is noticed that the eyes of the person are in constant movement, often focusing on Herbie. The rest of the soldier does not move. Herbie is directed to leave this area and proceeds to the back door. In this storage area, a large pile of bodies are stacked together. Some pieces of clothing are visible and appear to be that of both military garb and everyday clothing. No facial features are discernible in any of the bodies due to the way they are stacked up. Atop the bodies, an infected sits, appearing to have its lower parts fused to the pile, with its upper half in a wild state of flailing and seizures. Approximately every 10 seconds a burst of spores flies out the top of this infected, which linger in the air. Herbie is directed to leave the building. After leaving this building, Herbie passes by the village well, surrounding which are a series of immobile infected all facing the wall. The arms of each of these infected are stretched out, one in contact with the next, forming a perfect chain, save for those whose arms are down at their sides. Herbie passes by this last infected to approach what appears to have been the town hall or mayor's building, when the infected becomes mobile and snatches the rover up. Video feed from Herbie focuses on the face of the infected, which is strangely in perfect shape, given the condition of the rest of its body, which is horribly bloated. The infected was once a young girl from appearance, age estimated 10 to 12. Herbie is rolled side to side in its grip as its face stays motionless at the rover. The infected's face suddenly balloons in size and explodes outwards into a series of fleshy flaps that grip Herbie and draw it inside. Herbie's video feed terminates here. Herbie was considered lost at this point. However, no one at control remembered to turn off the video feed, assuming it cut. 5 hours later, Herbie's video feed resumed stationary and at a raised level pointing at the upper rim of the village well. The video feed contains some blur due to what happens to be a slimy film which often oozes across the lens, but when not obscured provides perfect quality recording. Herbie does not respond to any remote commands, but his video jerks back and forth from target to target, zooming in and out of its own accord. Video feed is cut manually, and all connections to Herbie's unit are considered erased. Part 2 will be coming out soon. Be sure to check out my social media outlets to get updates on when that is coming out. And if you can't wait that long, then consider becoming a Patreon. You'll get access to images for the next video as they are completed, early access, much more, and you'll be supporting me and the channel as it grows. Thank you everyone so much for your time, and I'll see you all soon.